This is the Open University.
Welcome to the Open University, and this is our new campus. This is the whole apartment. I think previously I've just shown you that side of the apartment, and there's been a slightly anomalous, a weird situation, almost Kafkaesque you could say, in that my first month in this new address in Berlin was spent sharing with a Japanese painter who was using this room as his studio. The former occupant had not left. He was having trouble finding a new place within the allotted time. He's someone who expected to leave after a 1-year stay, but then who got his visa extended 1 more year. So he was happy about that, and he knew that he had to find a new place to live. Oh, I can see myself in this light bulb. Also rather like Kafka or Le Petit Prince of Saint-Exupéry. I feel a bit like the little prince of this realm now that I've got both rooms. I've got a suite of rooms, and perhaps I'll do a cutaway shot of a little tour of the apartment, because what's fun about it is that you can walk in circles now. I can go pointlessly in circles round through the apartment, round and round, and it becomes like an infinite, a sort of infinity loop. So that's one thing to do, but of course life consists of having more important things to do. And I'm reminded a little bit of when I moved first into Osaka, the Docklands flat in Osaka, which I moved to in early 2015 with my partner. And I wrote something on the very first Tumblr entry I did after moving in there, said that when you live pretty much as you would wish, your life starts to take on a kind of end of history quality. And I feel that same feeling again here. There's a kind of end of history feeling. Actually, even more so here, because I've got all my boxes back from my storage, and so this is me. I'm living as I would wish to live. You know, this is an amazing apartment. I'm sort of ecstatic to be here, but there's also a sense of what'll we do now, in Spike Milligan's words. You know, at the end of every sketch in Q4, his characters would wander off saying, "What'll we do now?" like sort of zombies, and I'm slightly in that zombie phase because I haven't really decided what my next project is. I did want to start recording an album, and I did actually yesterday start recording an album. I wonder if I can play you a little piece of what I composed. I wasn't happy with it because it wasn't really going anywhere new. I was not loading. But I'll tell you the instrument that it sounds most like, and that is this harmonium thing. I showed you this last time, but now I can actually play you it. The nice thing about this is that it's got chord buttons. So you can actually compose very easily just by pushing one button. You can get a chord sequence. And as I said before, that was the song I wrote on this, notably before, was Mr. Consistency. I say the opposite of what I say. I've also got I'm going to shift the camera around a little bit. I've got my Korg Monopoly here, which has problems in doing polyphony. It's precisely those problems which make it interesting. So everything's kind of there for me to do music. I've got the same problem I had last year with my ears kind of being a little bit waxy, but I'm sort of de-waxing with olive oil. Okay, it's loaded finally. This is a little bit of what I was trying to do yesterday. just a chord sequence. Maybe it's not so bad. I've got 2 sets of speakers all connected up with Bluetooth, which actually also connect to the projector, and the projector connects to Bluetooth. Everything's Bluetooth connected, so no more cables. I've got a horrible spaghetti box in the corner here of cables, which has pursued me around the world, and luckily is now becoming kind of redundant, because everything's done wirelessly, but that brings its own complexities. But yeah, I was, because yesterday's composition wasn't really going anywhere, I was feeling that maybe I should do a book project. And actually, a couple of weeks ago, I had a meeting with an important American book editor who was the same guy actually who signed or was instrumental in getting signed my book of jokes to Dalkey Archive Press. And he's now working at a major New York imprint, which is a prestigious literary imprint, and he wants me to do a non-fiction book, which I shouldn't talk about in advance, so I'm doing a treatment for that. But as soon as I come up with an idea, I kind of get bored with it instantly, so I don't really know how I'm feeling about that. Another thing that militates against making an album is that there's kind of the sound of gentrification is invading the flat. First of all, it's very hot weather, so one's inclination would be to keep the front windows open, but the street is very noisy. There's a Turkish social club just outside where people are basically chattering out on the pavement until 3 or 4 in the morning. And there's also, from 7 in the morning, people doing point work on the building next door, which is being gentrified. It is the sound of gentrification because basically it's contractual, these landlords have to repoint and repaint their buildings every so many years. But also it's the sound of a street which is coming up in the world, and this is the fate of Berlin, to be coming up in the world, to be transforming itself endlessly. There are something like 10,000 construction sites in the city, I was reading yesterday, and one of them's right next door to me here, so aren't I the lucky one? There are whole neighborhoods, whole areas. I've been cycling about, and for instance, up near the East Side Gallery, there's a whole neighborhood there in between the S-Bahn tracks and the Spray River, which is just a massive chantier, a massive construction site. And it's just the price you pay for living in this city, which is, unlike Paris, or even to some extent London, it's not a completed city. It's always being bombed back to the Stone Age and then being rebuilt back to the future. So that's the process it's in just now. It's obviously leaping ahead. And I would like to be kind of leaping ahead in my own career too. I'm reading Philip Larkin's biography, so that's quite encouragingly disconsolate, I suppose you could say, because he's just in where I've got up to. He's just left Oxford and he's taken a job in a library in a little town called Wellington, which is sort of in the West Country, near Wales, I guess, south of Wales. And it's a dismal, depressing town, and it's the post-war period where food is still rationed and stuff. But he's beginning to publish novels and poems. He's written Jill and A Girl in Winter. And he's encouraged by that. I've got the Book of Scotland's coming out again. I've been looking at the cover with, redesigning the cover with Hagen Verlege, and meeting with people from Lewith Press who are putting it out, I think in September in Scotland. So I'll be over in Scotland in September doing promotional events. And if you can think of any promotional events to put on for me in Scotland, that would be much appreciated, because I would like to do some kind of reading/singing events in Edinburgh and Glasgow to tie in with that republication. It comes trailing a blaze of glorious quotes on the back this time, because the first time around it was an unknown quantity, and then it was sort of shortlisted for various prizes and things, and got a lot of attention. So in Scotland anyway, and politically things have not really moved on very much from where they were in 2009 when that book first came out. So there's still this quivering sense of Scottish independence as a possibility, but it's still really just an ephemeral mirage-like possibility. The drills are, I hope they're not disturbing you, they're slightly disturbing me. I'm going to take you on a little walk around the flat. I think I did a cutaway one, but I'm going to walk around and ponder things as I go. Probably the autofocus is going to be terribly annoying and not work, so I'm going to put it on manual. And now it's even more annoying. Put it to about 1 meter, I think, on manual. So there's a delightful, I don't know, I find this flat really light and encouraging. It's beautiful out the back. The back is also noisy, though, because it's the summer holidays and there are lots of children who are crying all the time and playing all the time out here through the back. But it's a classic Berlin courtyard, except the buildings at the end are gone, so it's not got that enclosed feeling. There's actually a colonies, a kind of garden allotments thing at the end there, so it's very green. But again, here through the back, you can also hear the stuff going on, the work going on next door. I've been given 2 bicycles, not 1 but 2 bicycles, by a very kindly artist who is departing Berlin, but he's going to get the use of them when he comes back. I've also got these stairs up into the bathroom, which is quite interesting. A staircase. I was photographed on this staircase actually last week by a passing Los Angeles I was going to say investigator, but she's a girl doing a website vaguely related to Wired, I think. Wired magazine. There's a bath, thank goodness. I love baths, so I'm taking 2 baths a day or 3 baths a day just to cool down, just sort of lying in tepid water. Because it is very hot. It's over 30 degrees every day. It's actually warmer here than it is in parts of southern Europe or even Africa or even Yangon and all these hot places I was in January are actually cooler now because it's the rainy season there than here. So I've got this beautiful ceramic fireplace here, which would be very good in winter. In the other room, there's this wood-burning stove, which will also be very, very useful in the sort of semi-Russian winters you get here. I've sort of distributed the bookshelves, which were previously going much taller here, between the 2 rooms. So, yeah, what to do, who to be, what to do. Got all my CDs there. When I was carrying these boxes in, I was saying, basically cursing all the people who'd ever given me a home-burned CD. So if that was you, fuck you very much, pal, for breaking my back. And I probably didn't even listen to your demos. I'm terribly sorry about that. There's me. That's who it's all about. The monad, the singleton, living in this rather luxurious, to me it's rather luxurious suite of rooms. And that's the tripod, rather hastily conceived. And I'm sitting on Schoenberg. That's interesting, isn't it? Tripod sitting on Schoenberg. There's a good title for a song. Actually, Pierre Lunaire, what have I been listening to? The kind of things I'm listening to is lute music. Actually, Michael Nyman's 1 to 100, which is a film soundtrack he made for a Peter Greenaway film, is probably the piece of music I've been playing the most, and it's delightfully restrained, rarefied structuralist, since it was a structuralist film. And I suppose there's a kind of gap between the kind of music that I listen to for pleasure in a space like this, an end of history space, and the kind of music I'm making, because I gravitate always to making songs and to playing out sort of personae in the songs, whereas I genuinely don't have the attention span to listen to that. I'll tell you some interesting things I've been listening to, though. First of all, I heard last night there was an opera by a kind of, sort of avant-garde classical composer called Tansy Davis, called The Cave, and I was sort of enjoying that, although it was stretching my tolerance a little bit after a while. I was wondering what the language of that orchestral music, but done in an avant-garde way, is what is that language? This is very interesting. Like when she gets rhythmic, she's sort of atonal. She doesn't seem to use chord sequences in the way that a songwriter would, but it's somewhat more about musical coloration, which interests me. I ask myself, could I do that kind of thing? Could I make an album of songs which was atonal and which used much more coloration and arrangement and note clusters and things just like sculptural musical objects. And also I've been listening to a Swedish guy called, it's called the Swedish Congo Record, and it's on Bandcamp. Somebody called Peder Mannerfelt, I guess a Swedish guy who's made synthesizer versions of African music. Cultural appropriation, it's a dubious and dangerous thing, but he's sort of interested me because he's doing what I was doing with North African music last year. This is the big question that confronts me. Should I continue the sort of styles and experiments of last year? I mean, I got a bit of a tongue lashing when I was in Paris from my friend Tug, Gilles, who was sort of saying, he didn't like my Japanese samples and he found my current style frustrating and my arrangements too dense. But I think that's more speaking about something he's going through. I'm personally very happy with at least half of my last record. I listened a lot to the title track, Pellicoque, and some of the other tracks. At least half of it I don't listen to at all. But the other direction I could be taking is this sort of Brechtian cabaret thing, which since I've come to Berlin, I feel that would be appropriate, so making kind of my versions of political songs that Brecht had made with Eisler and with Weil, and basically this Neo-Weimar theme. That's another possibility that I could say, well, here I am in Berlin and here we are possibly in some semi-fascist historical period, and talk about the parallels, the aesthetic parallels and the political parallels to the Weimar Republic time. I don't know. I don't have an answer to all that. I don't know where to go next, whether to write a book, whether to make a record, what the record would sound like, and it's dispiriting in some way. I'm full of this sort of anxiety of not really feeling that I'm doing anything significant. At the same time, being in my ideal environment and having this freedom is tremendously precious to me. The other thing I was thinking about was getting a girlfriend and sort of vaguely dating with people and flirting with people in the vicinity. And it's kind of either or with me. If I'm doing that, I'm probably going to concentrate on that. But it's also summer holiday time, so everybody's gone back to their hometowns and things now. And it's sort of the doldrums of the really hot period of the summer. So I'm not really thinking about trying to find a girlfriend. I do have a kind of a girlfriend in Paris, but she's also on her summer holidays. Those things are that's my number 2 default setting, if you like, is flirtation. My number 1 default setting is art. And that's, I guess, always going to be the most important thing for me. Just got to the stage in the Philip Larkin biography, Andrew Motion one, where Larkin is talking about marriage. And Larkin was pretty misogynistic, to be honest. Him and Amos, when they got together, were the worst. But he's very much in the school of the pram in the hall. It's that Cyril Connolly phrase, the pram in the hall is the enemy of art. And Larkin, as Kafka also said, Kafka was always trying to get married, always aiming to get married, but failing. But he also admitted in his diaries that solitude, he couldn't have achieved anything without solitude, this unwelcome solitude, which allows you to have a serious attitude to life. And I found something Larkin said actually very telling. What mainly worries me, he says in a letter to Amos, or to Sutton rather, is a strengthening suspicion that in my character there is an antipathy between art and life. I find that once I give in to another person, as I've given in, not altogether voluntarily, but almost completely to Ruth, that was his girlfriend at the time, who'd actually just moved to London, there is a slackening and dulling of the particular artistic fibres that makes it impossible to achieve that mental clenching that crystallizes a pattern and keeps it still while you draw it. It's very easy to float along in a semi-submerged way, dissipating one's talent for pleasing by amusing and by being affectionate to the other. Easy because the returns are instant and delightful, but I find myself that this letting in of a second person spells death to perception and the desire to express, as well as the ability. Time and time again, I feel that before I write anything else at all, I must drag myself out of the water, shake myself dry, and sit down on a lonely rock to contemplate glittering loneliness. Marriage, of course, is impossible if one wants to do this. So he never married, of course. He had a lot of sort of casual girlfriends, I've been in a relationship which was very undemanding and very minimal for the last 12 years, up until the end of last year. And actually that was a rather ideal compromise because it kind of kept me out of trouble, and it didn't require much maintenance, emotional input. And I was able to write a lot of books and make a lot of music. And I don't know if I'll find that again. I'm at a stage in my life where it's kind of, you never quite know if you can pick up and, start again. And I kind of feel that I could go back into a new relationship, back into it. It's sort of a paradox, isn't it? That I could start a new relationship. But at the same time, I could almost just be lazy and say, mendokusai, as they say in Japan. This is why the Japanese are currently the most sexless people in the world, apparently not really having sex, and they can't be bothered to have relationships because A, it's expensive, B, it requires a lot of time and effort, which they don't have because they're working 2 jobs just to pay the rent, and or they're living at home with their parents, which is not a very inherently attractive situation. So I don't know. That's another thing I'm struggling with, whether I'm able to, still appeal to women, and whether it's actually worth all the effort. Because it's fairly bruising to be, to have a nice date with someone and then be rebuffed later when they think about it, and, this kind of endless negotiation you have to do. So, but I'm terribly lucky, and I'm still able to be appealing to some people, and also quite young and attractive people. Yeah, what more is there for me to say? I should really be getting down to my work. I've been trying to, little consolations like drinking my Arabica, coffee. Arabica is a Kyoto cafe, my favorite Kyoto cafe, my favorite Japanese cafe, which has a branch here in Berlin. I was amazed to find out. And also Muji has started stocking Muji curry, which I was living on pretty much exclusively in Tokyo a couple of months ago. But I couldn't find the Massaman curry, which is my favorite flavor, because that's a minority curry. Muji actually streams into Family Mart in Japan. There are 3 most popular curries, but then they've got a range of about 10 curries, which are kind of mainstream, but those are the ones they carry in the Berlin store. But then they had another 10 or so obscure ones, which were constantly changing. And Massaman was one of the obscure offerings. The drill's getting a little more intense, intrusive. I think I might leave this Open University broadcast there and say, these are my problems. I really have to sort them out. I have to decide what record I'm going to make, what book I'm going to write. Ideas are 10 a penny, but you've got to sit down and actually prosecute and execute. So with that grim task dangling over me like a sword of Damocles or a light bulb of Damocles, I will say farewell.
Open University.